Professor, you said I was thinking to ask this question. Uh, how has this changed? So it's been 3 years for me to be in United States. But when I was back in Nepal, we didn't have laptop. We used to study with the book. So there is no way that I can hide and just use the social media or whatever in laptop the way we can do here because we have the access of laptop in the class. Was it similar during your time? You also used to have a laptop in the class and you can do whatever, or this has changed?
So you're a computer science person, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I started college, I'm going to talk computer science language for you. We didn't even have, we had a machine called a PDP mainframe, and then we got a VAX mainframe, and we thought that was amazing because we could send email on the VAX mainframe. That was all. That was all big computers. We didn't have desktop machines at all. We had nothing in the classroom but notebooks and books. We had no technology because laptops did not exist. Desktop computers barely existed, and most of our desktop things we had were just terminals that connected to a mainframe computer. And so we just didn't have the technology at all. I went to college in 1986, and I brought a typewriter to college that, it was a typewriter. I could plug it in, but it was a typewriter. I left college with a Macintosh, and during my 4 years at college, I was exposed to a lot of different types of computing machinery that I hadn't seen before. So I saw an old Zenith Z100 computer that had 2 floppy disk drives that I could use to write something on WordStar. I learned about email, although I didn't have it. We had a web, I don't even call it web browser. We had a way to access the internet through something called Gopher, and Gopher was a text-based search engine. It didn't do anything. There was no graphics associated with it. We didn't have graphics cards in our monitor, so you couldn't produce any graphics anyway. It wasn't until the Macs came along that we started to see graphics. So my undergraduate college, we didn't have any of that. We wrote notes to each other and we talked, but we didn't have any technology. When I started graduate school in 1990, we had more access to it. We had more PCs around, and I had my Macintosh, but still nothing talked to the internet because the internet didn't exist yet. The internet popped up for public consumption probably around 92 or 93, and it didn't really take hold until 95 when the first browsers showed up, which Mosaic and Netscape and these other browsers showed up. And it was mind-blowing. It was amazing. And there was the Wild West out there. People were producing websites for everything. I had assignments for years where my students built websites using HTML code because that's what we had access to. And I did a lot of programming too. When I was in graduate school, I had to do my doctoral dissertation, and that involved people reading texts line by line on a computer screen. Well, I had to program that. There was nothing that could do that, so I had to write code and compile my code, and I had to use internal computer clocks to do things and all kinds of keyboard polling software, not software, but to write code so it pulled the keyboard in the right way. And all of that was something that we just had to learn. And it was around 95, 96 when you started to see graphical interface and all of that, and it just changed everything when we had that. So no, we didn't. Even through graduate school, I didn't bring a computer to class until probably 98 or 99 when I was teaching, and I would carry a laptop with me. Before that, so my first, 12 years, there was no computers at all in my classrooms. There was just, there was just, notebooks, and I'd write on the board, or I'd have an overhead projector with slides that I would put on the flat.
So, Professor, please share how has technology or access of internet, access of laptop in the classes has made teaching and learning easier and difficult?
So a lot of my colleagues think that technology has ruined learning. I disagree. What it's done is it has changed the calculus. Students don't need to know things the way they did before. They need to know how to think about things. And so I have colleagues who spend a lot of time working on getting students to create the opportunity to show they know content. Well, the content's in their pocket. They can look it up anytime. The key is, how do you get students to understand, integrate, think through, enhance the content? So the whole teaching process has changed. It's made learning more difficult too, because students want the learning they had before, which was just memorize stuff. Well, memorizing stuff's actually pretty easy. It's the other stuff that's much harder. So students struggle with trying to do the other stuff, and I don't blame them. It's harder. Um, so I think it's just changed what happens in classes. I don't lecture nearly as much as I used to. I do a lot more interactive stuff. I also don't test the way I used to. I do a lot more stuff that involves creativity from the students because it's a different world in terms of what we want them to be able to do now than we wanted them to do 25, 30 years ago. It's just that they don't need to do those things. I can tell you this, 508-832-3279 is my grandmother's phone number. She died in 1989. I don't know my children's phone number because everyone's phone has a button that says your kid's names and you push it. I didn't have that when I was a kid. I had to memorize those numbers. So I think it's just, there's been a big change. And if I can get technical for a minute, it has changed what you have to spend cognitive load on. You don't have to think about some of those things anymore because you've offloaded it somewhere else. The key is to figure out how you're going to offload that cognitive load and what you're going to do with it, how you're going to navigate the world by using the available resources you have to think through things.
Professor, that what are the different things that you bring? What are the different things that you do in the class in comparison to other professors?
So it's hard. Everybody's different. Everybody brings different sets of skills. I tend to be pretty informal in the classroom. I tend to be pretty loud. I tend to be pretty engaged. My students know that I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to stand there until someone says something. They know that I'm going to call on people randomly, and they know that it's all in the name of learning, not in the name of shame. Or if you don't know an answer and I call on you, you say, I don't know, it's not a big deal. We move to the next person. We don't even acknowledge it because it's not about proving anything. It's about being engaged. And some of my favorite answers are, I don't know, but if you come back to me in a couple minutes, I'll have something. And I go to someone else and come back and they have something. That means they've been thinking about it. And that's really what I want people to do. Um, I also teach very early in the morning, so my students tend to be tired, and so I work hard to wake them up. So my classes are, I'm proud of my teaching. I think I'm a very competent teacher. I think students learn a lot in my classes, and I think they value the opportunity. So I enjoy being in the classroom a lot.
Yeah, Professor, I want to quote something from the website that I found. Over the year, Chris research has focused on the reading comprehension, teaching and learning effective faculty development and assessment. What is comprehension? What is reading comprehension?
So reading comprehension is your ability to read something and understand and integrate what it is you read. So I spent a lot of my early part of my career looking at how students read stories and remember the gist of the story, like what's happening. Later in my career, I spent more time talking about how students remember from the textbooks they read and those other materials. And we can break it down in lots of ways. We can look at eye movements and how people's eyes move across the page, which actually predicts lots of comprehension variables. We can look at how much people remember from what they read. We can look at reading speed. We can look at accuracy of answering questions. There's all kinds of variables we can look at. Comprehension is the sum total of being able to walk away from something you've read and be able to sort of think about it and then talk about it such that you're able to pull in different parts of what you read. So if you're reading a novel, you can pull in a little bit from the beginning of the novel, the middle, the end, and you can sort of see the development of the character. If it's a shorter thing or it's an expository text, comprehension is your ability to describe it to someone else. It's your ability to articulate a response to some kind of phenomena. So it really is a matter of being able to take what you've read and do something with it.
Professor, I asked this question because even though I read the book, even though I read the novel, but at the end I found that I didn't understand what is in the novel. But
Mm-hmm.
if you say, I will remember, oh, I read something like that. So what is comprehensive reading here, or how I can make my reading more comprehensive?
So reading comprehension is really a function of how much you have background knowledge that allows you to be able to integrate what you're reading. And what often happens is you build up background knowledge as you go through a text and you build a sort of mental model of what's going on. But in some cases, if you don't do that early on, the story becomes just sentences and gibberish and it doesn't really connect with what you're trying to do. So it's really important, I would argue, that if you want comprehension to be high, you do a lot of sort of prep to read. So if it's like something for class, you spend time looking at the summary. You think about what the chapter's about. You spend time looking at the table of contents and other parts of the book so that you can have a better idea what the book is about or the topic is. And then from there you build out an understanding by stopping frequently, talking to yourself, writing down, the main points, but really sort of moving through with intention. And I keep coming back to that term, but I can't I can't lose sight of the fact that education should be intentional. You should be working towards doing better at whatever it is you're trying to do. And when people don't do that, they get kind of lost. That's when things are boring or things don't make sense or things are confusing. If you have an intentional goal for what you're trying to do, you're able to continuously sort of refocus that goal onto what you're trying to do. And it helps you sort of think about it in a different way. And it's more effective.
Okay, Professor, I see when you were saying about the intentional. Yeah, there are some classes where I feel like no, I need to read this because I need this. I'm like more intentional. No, I need this class. I'm doing good. But there is also one thing a lot of students see over there. For example, I'm a computer science student, so I think that I need to know only about the computer science. Why do I need to learn about the literature? Basically, in the liberal art and more the STEAM student, they think like this. What is your opinion on this topic?
So I think that students want to have relevance for what they're learning, but they don't want to do the work that helps contextualize the relevance of what they're learning. And I'll give you an example. I'm going to pull back from the computer science and talk about this. Students will say to me, why am I taking this class when my major's this? And I say, this, and I use these numbers all the time. I say, you have 168 hours in a week. You spend 78 of those hours sleeping or working. The rest of the time, you're a human. So all this other stuff helps you center humans in a way that makes sense. And so you have to think about, okay, if that's my goal, I can be a little bit more intentional about how I go about studying for this class. I can be more intentional about how I try to learn that material. But if you don't have a goal for why you're trying to learn something, it feels like a waste of time and it feels useless. And so I try to help students find their purpose, find their goal, find the ways that they can be intentional in their metacognitive approach. And metacognitive is, thinking about their own thinking. So be intentional about that approach so that when you go after some kind of content or some kind of topic, you have reasons for doing it and you're able to integrate that into the reasons that you're trying to do it.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Professor, you are the director. As a director, how do you identify, like, how do you identify what are the things, what is the things that need to be improved in that special instructor or professor? How do you find, how, for example, if I'm coming as an instructor, what are the things or how will you identify what are the things that I need to improve?
Yeah, yeah.
How do you find the pain point or weakness point?
So I ask faculty to meet with me so I can talk to them about what they want me to do and what they want me to look for. And then we have a conversation around why and what they're doing and all of that. And then I'll observe faculty members. So I don't like to help faculty until I've seen them teach and I know what they're doing. So part of it is getting a feel for what they think they're doing, what they think is happening, and then my perspective. And one of the things that I do when I watch them teach is after a few minutes, I actually ask the teacher to leave, and then I ask the students about what's going on in class. The students will give me a much more direct and honest answer about whether or not the instructor is serving them the way they need to be served. And so I get multiple perspectives. I get my perspective, I get the faculty member's perspective, and I get the student's perspective. So I can sort of think through what's going to be the best way for me to provide guidance and assistance for this faculty member. I don't just do it blindly. I want as much data as I can get to help the faculty member in a way that's going to help.
Professor, you said a very interesting thing. You said that when the instructor come, then I ask. I think this is one of the hardest things in the people that to figure out what is their weakness. And the people who have spent their 30, 40 years, how they can think that this is like I am having this issue. How common is this that instructor come and say, hey, I'm having this problem?
That's how I get my people to come see me. I do not get people. I sometimes someone will try to send someone to me to see me, but in general, people come to me because they're concerned that they're not doing as good a job as they could.
So, what what do you think? How they know that they are not doing the good job?
So faculty, well, first off, they get student evaluations, and those have an impact on faculty. My line outside my office door increases when the evaluations come out, because faculty are freaking out over that. But also, they'll be observed by a chair. The chair will point out that they think they're doing something that they don't like, or they'll have student comments that they'll read consistently, and they'll be like, maybe I'm not doing that right. And for many of them, their self-awareness is not as strong as to know exactly what's wrong, but to know their class isn't going quite right. And so I've had people come to me and say, I just don't feel like I'm connecting with this class. And so then it becomes, okay, if you're not connecting, why not? Let's talk about that. Let's try to figure that out. And it's hard because you then have to face the fear that you're not as good as you thought you were. But for most of us, ego is something that we had sort of stripped from us early on. My advisor in grad school wouldn't let me have an ego. He would have lost his mind if I had an ego. So I just learned that he was always in charge.
Professor, was there any moment or any time when you tried to say something to the professor, like other instructor, and they understood, or they took it wrong in the wrong way, or was there any time where you become like, oh, what did I do? You said something and they took in the negative way.
So I have two answers to that question. One, the first answer, yes, happens all the time. Faculty hear what they want to hear and they do what they want to do, and I can tell them something and they'll go and try it and they'll be like, well, Chris said, and I'm like, that's not what I said, but that's okay. But two, I can tell you about a time when I said something that I backed off of, and that was during pandemic. When pandemic first hit, I didn't think we were going to be able to do remote teaching. I thought we were going to do everything asynchronously. But after a couple of months, I realized we needed some remote teaching too. And so I reversed course on a previous statement I had made. I sent an email to everybody on faculty and said, we're not going to worry about doing it at the same time. We're not going to try to do it synchronously. And then I realized we have to. Students needed it, and I turned it around, and we went to a different model because I think we just needed to reconsider and relaunch what we were doing.
So, what is the good thing that we got as a school, as a teacher, professor? What is the good thing that you got from the COVID?
From COVID? Not much.
Because you said we went to the technology thing,
Yeah, there's a lot more
online.
technology. Before COVID, faculty didn't need to put anything on Brightspace. Now faculty have to put something on Brightspace. I think faculty some became more appreciative of the time with their students. I think some faculty understood that their freedom and flexibility was going to decrease, and they didn't like that very much. But some faculty didn't change anything, and they just kept doing their thing. So I think it was a really interesting time. And I think that what the college's response was pretty typical with what's happening around here, but it's also a response that led to a lot of fear and anxiety as we got closer and closer to when things opened up again. And I don't think that's Springfield's fault. I think that's how many institutions operated. And I think it's kind of a shame because when COVID had started to really fade and we had more time, I wanted to get students back right away because I thought it would be helpful for them to learn in an environment that was face-to-face versus the Zoom windows.
Okay. Professor, when we are talking about the learning from both the scientific and practical perspective, how do human learn? Because you have spent a lot of your decade in human learning understanding. So from the scientific and practical point of view, how do human learn and understand?
How much time do you have? I can talk about this for a long time. I'll be short. Humans learn by association of what they're hearing with something they already know. And if they don't know anything, then humans have to develop a new cognitive structure to be able to remember. And a faculty member who doesn't appreciate and acknowledge and utilize this is one who is going to continuously have students who struggle. But if you can help your students see the connections between what they're trying to learn and what they already know, then you go a long way towards winning, and students come out much better educated with much better sort of all-around perspective on the world. But I think that we are in a position now where we're become more isolationists. And because of that, we're going to have more and more people who are not particularly worried about any perspective outside of their own. And so even some of the things that we have to do for conferences now to make sure people feel welcome, that's going to go out the door at some point because people are not going to have to worry about feeling so welcome and comfortable in any particular environment because people are going to people are going to consider education as something that is stacking knowledge. It's not education. And that actually makes me very nervous They're going to see it as like, I need to learn this and I learn this and I learn this, and all of a sudden something happens. But as you know from a programmer, you could learn 3 different languages that all do things a different way, but that doesn't make you a programmer. You become a programmer when you understand the inherent logic in languages, and you can go through multiple languages and think through some of the implications. We've lost sight of that in higher education.